a teenage criminal from Washington's Camano Island, gained a cult online following after committing a series of high-profile thefts without any shoes on. Beginning in the mid-2000s, commonly referred to as the Barefoot Bandit, Colton Harris Moore started exhibiting troubling behavior at a young age. He would regularly run away from home, spending days at a time alone in nearby forests. In order to survive in the wild, Harris Moore broke into homes to steal food and supplies. His inaugural criminal conviction for stealing came at the age of 12, after which he served numerous stints in juvenile detention centers. The boy's behavioral issues bled into his conduct in the classroom, and he was eventually transferred to Lincoln Hill Alternative School because of his disciplinary record. By the 9th grade, he dropped out of school altogether. Harris Moore's propensity to steal only worsened thereafter, and a warrant was issued for his arrest on July the 14th of 2006. He went on the run and was a fugitive for the next 6 months. According to Brad Holden of HistoryLink, the case captured the nation's attention because of the teen's uncanny ability to evade law enforcement for so long without any outside help. While on the run, Harris Moore reportedly constructed hidden campsites in the woods and continued breaking into nearby vacation homes. In addition to pilfering food and camping supplies, the teen started accessing computers inside the houses he burglarized. He used the internet to teach himself how to steal people's identities, enabling him to secure credit cards in homeowners' names. Harris Moore was finally apprehended in February of 2007. The following year, he landed in the Griffin Home Residential Treatment Center, a minimum security halfway house. Though initially on his best behavior at Griffin, Harris Moore ultimately hatched an escape plan and broke out 2 months after his arrival. On the run once again, the teen resumed his criminal activity and media coverage of the situation intensified. It was around this time that he earned his Barefoot Bandit nickname, although local law enforcement stated that he committed most of his crimes with shoes. He subsequently fled Camano Island but continued stealing and was said to have been responsible for upwards of 100 thefts in Washington, Idaho, and Canada. According to police, Harris Moore would occasionally break into houses just to take a bath or eat some ice cream without taking any valuables with him. The years-long saga culminated in July of 2010, when Harris Moore allegedly stole a plane in Bloomington, Indiana, and flew it to the Bahamas. A week later, he was arrested on Harbor Island while attempting to flee from police officers in a boat. In December of 2011, the teen thief turned cult hero was sentenced to more than 7 years in prison for his international burglary spree. 20th Century Fox purchased the film rights to a book written by Bob Friel, which centered around Harris Moore's criminal exploits. Number 6. Claudia Ochoa Feliz. Claudia Ochoa Feliz from the Mexican state of Sinaloa was found dead at her residence in Culiacan on September the 14th of 2019. The social media influencer was said to have close ties to Mexico's organized crime scene, specifically the Sinaloa cartel, which was led by the infamous drug lord El Chapo, prior to his extradition to the United States in 2017. Leading up to her sudden death, Feliz came to be known as the Kim Kardashian of organized crime because of her purported resemblance to the American celebrity. She built a considerable social media following by flaunting her lavish lifestyle online, posting photos in high-end sports cars, private jets, and yachts. She garnered increased attention in 2014 when she uploaded pictures to her social media in which she was holding pink and gold AK-47s. Rumors began circulating that Feliz was the leader of the Sinaloa cartel's team of assassins known as Los Antrax. She denied the accusations, but the rumors persisted, in part due to the fact that she was in a relationship with Jose Rodrigo Arechiga, or El Chino Antrax. The latter reportedly helmed the armed enforcement group before he was ultimately arrested, after which Feliz allegedly took over the reins. However, Mexican authorities clarified that the woman wasn't being actively investigated at the time of her death. Feliz's cause of death was determined to be pulmonary aspiration brought on by a drug overdose. There were widespread rumors that she'd been assassinated because of her cartel ties, but Sinaloa's prosecutor general stated that her death derived from a non-violent cause. Number 5. John Gotti. John Joseph Gotti Jr., better known as legendary mobster John Gotti, turned to a life of crime while growing up in poverty in New York City during the 1940s. It wasn't long before he and his brothers found themselves in the good graces of the higher-ups of the Gambinos, an Italian-American mafia group, and one of the New York's so-called Five Families. Gotti flourished under the tutelage of Gambino underboss Agnello Della Croce, who was based out of the Ozone Park neighborhood of Queens. In 1985, as the heat surrounding the Gambino family started to turn up, Gotti and his brothers began to worry. The FBI indicted multiple members of the family for dealing narcotics. At the time, the Gambino family's boss was Paul Castellano, who'd been running the organization for the better part of a decade. Gotti didn't think that Castellano was an effective leader, believing him to be too greedy and aloof. As law enforcement continued zeroing in on the family's members, the Gottis devised a plot to protect themselves while maintaining good standing within what was described as America's most powerful crime syndicate. In December of 1985, in the midst of disagreements about who should lead the Gambinos, Gotti orchestrated Castellano's assassination, fearing that he and his brothers might be killed. In the years that followed, Gotti's rise up the totem pole of New York City's criminal underworld continued. He took over as the leader of the Gambino family and eventually solidified himself as one of the nation's most powerful and feared mafia bosses. Gotti earned the nickname the Teflon Don after beating 3 separate criminal cases during the 1980s. The venerated mobster reportedly tampered with jury members and used witness intimidation to get through the high-profile trials unscathed. Gotti's iconic reign of terror came to an end in the early 90s after his underboss, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, agreed to turn state's witness. Gravano was upset with Gotti after hearing a wiretap in which he implicated both of them in several murders. With Sammy the Bull in tow, Gotti was found guilty of 5 murders, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction of justice, tax evasion, illegal gambling, extortion, and loan sharking. He was given life without parole but died of throat cancer in June of 2002. Following his criminal conviction, Gotti was the subject of numerous movies, TV shows, and song lyrics. In 2018, he was portrayed by John Travolta in a biographical film about his life. Number 4. John Dillinger. One of the most notorious and publicity-hungry criminals of all time was Chicago gangster John Dillinger, whose eventful run as a bank robber in the early 1900s made his story the stuff of legends. The Indiana native was a troubled youth who acted out in school and frequently got in trouble for fighting, bullying, and stealing. As his rebellious behavior continued into the early 1920s, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Dillinger's military career was short-lived, however, as he deserted a few months after enlisting and was later dishonorably discharged. During the course of the next year, Dillinger continued committing crimes which resulted in him being sentenced to prison time in 1924. After serving 9 years at Indiana Reformatory and Indiana State Prison, he was paroled in May of 1933, at the height of the Great Depression. The man subsequently ramped up his criminal activity and committed his first bank robbery at the helm of the so-called Dillinger Gang. Only a month and a half after his release, he reportedly stole $10,000 from the New Carlisle National Bank, then robbed a bank in Ohio less than 2 months later. For the next year, Dillinger and his gang of miscreants carried out a reported 24 bank robberies, in addition to robbing 4 police stations. At the height of his crime spree, Dillinger was something of a media darling. He was often portrayed as a larger-than-life outlaw, which appealed to a country in the throes of its worst economic depression. Publications embellished the details of his crimes and the uncommon flair with which he carried them out, as stated by Dean Reynolds of CBS News. Nothing exemplified Dillinger's taste for theatrics quite like his signature move, which was to bolt over the counter while holding up a bank or establishment. In the press, he was likened to Robin Hood, which angered J. Edgar Hoover, director of the Bureau of Investigation. Dillinger's notoriety convinced Hoover and others to push for the formation of the FBI and a more sophisticated approach to taking on organized crime. After several run-ins with the police, Dillinger was tracked to the Biograph Theater in Chicago on July the 22nd of 1934. Federal agents closed in on him as he exited the building, but he fled, leading to an exchange of gunfire. He was struck by 4 bullets, one of which entered through the back of his neck, severing his spinal cord before exiting just under his right eye, killing him. Dillinger's story has been dramatized numerous times in the years following his death, the most notable being Michael Mann's 2009 crime drama, Public Enemies, which saw Johnny Depp portray the infamous outlaw. Number 3. Stanley Tooky Williams III. In 1969, a pair of troubled teens from Los Angeles, California, formed a partnership that would come to be known as the Crips, an alliance of street criminals founded to protect their neighborhood from more powerful gangs. The original Crips were composed of 30 members, with its 2 leaders being Raymond Washington and Stanley Tooky Williams III. In the 1970s, Williams and Washington lost control of the group, first when it was divided into the West Side and East Side Crips, and then as it expanded to the farthest corners of the state of California. In 1979, Washington was gunned down in Los Angeles, leading to a war between rival Crips factions, though no one was ever arrested in connection with the murder. Meanwhile, that same year, Williams experienced his own downfall. While high on PCP, he and 3 fellow gangsters robbed a convenience store and fatally shot the clerk, Albert Owens, with a pair of execution-style shots to the back. Then in March of 1979, Williams broke into the Brookhaven Motel in Los Angeles, killing 3 members of the Taiwanese family that owned the building. Although Williams himself denied involvement in the 4 murders, several Crips members would go on to testify that the prominent gangster bragged about committing the crimes. Following his conviction in 1981, Williams was sentenced to death. While sitting on death row at San Quentin State Prison, Williams earned a 6.5-year stint in solitary confinement through attacks on corrections officers and other inmates. After 2 years in solitary, Williams experienced a self-proclaimed personal transformation. He began speaking out against gang violence, and in 1996 he co-authored the first of his 8 anti-gang books targeted towards children. He publicly apologized for his role in forming the Crips and was even nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize by a member of Swiss Parliament in 2002. Following his highly publicized change of heart, Williams and his supporters fought for his death sentence to be commuted. The former gangster even met with then California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to discuss his bid for clemency. After the meeting, however, Schwarzenegger upheld Williams' original punishment and he was put to death on December the 13th of 2005. Today's topic was inspired by K.W. Harding. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Devon Dquan Bennett. Before climbing the Billboard charts with acclaimed singles like Crazy Story and Took Her to the O, Chicago drill rapper Devon Dquan Bennett, better known as King Von, had several run-ins with the law. His first stint behind bars came in 2012 when he was arrested for weapons offenses. 2 years later, Bennett was a person of interest as part of the investigation into the shooting of Gangster Disciples member Gakira Barnes, who was 17 at the time of her death. However, inconsistencies between witness testimonies led to the young man being released without charge. The following month, Bennett was questioned by police in connection with yet another shooting death, that of Malcolm Stuckey. This time, there was enough evidence to charge the rapper with first-degree murder. Following a trial in December of 2017, Bennett was acquitted, but was back in custody a few months later after assaulting a police officer at the Parkway Garden Homes in Chicago, commonly referred to as O-Block. Bennett, along with fellow Chicago rapper Lil Durk, were arrested in connection with the armed robbery and shooting of Alexander Witherspoon on February the 5th of 2019. He was later released on a $300,000 bond. Bennett's final arrest came in September of that year when he was accused of aggravated battery in Atlanta. In November of 2020, the rapper and some of his associates got into an altercation outside of Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta. Guns were drawn when the confrontation escalated, and 26-year-old Bennett was fatally shot. The artist's posthumous reputation took a massive hit in April of 2023 following the release of a YouTube documentary entitled King Von, rap's first serial killer. In the video, creator, Trap Law Ross, supported his titular proclamation by delving into several killings that Bennett had been linked to prior to his death. Ross contended that Bennett committed at least 10 murders, including those of Gakira Barnes and Malcolm Stuckey. The rapper also served as the mandator for multiple other gang-related slayings, according to Ross. The documentary was met with backlash from Bennett's supporters and family. Although it was initially removed from YouTube, it was later re-uploaded and amassed nearly 10 million views in less than a year. Now that you know more about infamous inmates and iconic killers, keep watching after number 1 for what happens when pursuing internet fame goes wrong. Number 1. Amanda Knox. The inciting incident to one of the most controversial criminal cases of the 21st century unfolded on November the 1st of 2007. At the time, 20-year-old exchange student Amanda Knox, a Washington native, was studying abroad in Italy. She shared a ground-floor apartment in Perugia with 3 other women, one of whom was 21-year-old Meredith Kircher, a British exchange student. On the night in question, Kircher returned to the apartment at around 9 p.m. After watching a movie at her friend's house. It's been surmised that the young woman was alone in the building, given that it was a public holiday and all of the Italian residents were likely gone. The following day, Knox tried calling Kircher after noticing a disturbed scene in the apartment. Kircher didn't answer the phone and her bedroom door was locked, so Knox got in touch with one of her other roommates expressing concern. Shortly before 1 p.m., Knox's boyfriend, Rafael Solicito, contacted local law enforcement. Responding police officers didn't want to damage private property by kicking down the bedroom door, in spite of the fact that the front door had been left open and there were bloodstains in the bathroom. One of Knox's roommates kicked Kircher's door in and found the young woman dead on the floor. She'd been stabbed in the neck and ultimately succumbed to massive blood loss. In the days that followed, Knox and Solicito were questioned in connection with Kircher's murder. The pair had spent the night of the incident together at Solicito's apartment, seemingly ruling them out as potential suspects. However, following intense interrogations by Italian police, the lawfulness and validity of which have been heavily disputed, the couple were arrested for murder along with Patrick Lumumba, who owned the bar where Knox was employed part-time. The latter reportedly implicated Lumumba and herself in Kircher's killing after being coerced into doing so by investigators. A strong alibi enabled Lumumba to prove his innocence shortly thereafter. But Knox and Solicito ultimately went to trial and were found guilty in 2009. The case was closely covered in the Italian press, which portrayed Knox in an exceedingly negative light even before her trial started. Knox's conviction was the subject of immediate controversy. Many forensic analysts from the United States expressed their belief that the available evidence actually pointed to Knox's innocence. She spent 2 years in prison before being exonerated, along with Solicito, in October of 2011. Following a retrial 2 years later, the pair were found guilty yet again, but Italy's Supreme Court of Cassation definitively acquitted them in 2015. In the years that followed, Knox became a prominent author and activist, though her high-profile case has proven to be the subject of immense controversy to this day. Number 8. Allan and Alex Stokes. In 2021, twin YouTubers Allan and Alex Stokes, both in their early 20s, were sentenced to community service and a year's probation after pleading guilty to charges stemming from faking a robbery. The incident occurred in Irvine, Orange County, California. In October of 2019, the Stokes' videographer filmed the twins as they wore balaclavas and carried duffel bags full of cash, pretending they just robbed a bank. On October the 15th, the pair hailed an Uber and got into the vehicle, claiming that their getaway driver had abandoned them. The driver refused to transport them, and a bystander who'd witnessed the exchange alerted the authorities. When the police arrived at the scene, they ordered the driver out at gunpoint but released him upon realizing he wasn't involved. Officers let the twins go with a warning, but roughly 4 hours later, they allegedly pulled the same prank again, with the emergency services receiving calls about a robbery once more. The brothers uploaded a clip of the prank gone wrong to their YouTube channel, but it has since been deleted. Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer condemned their actions as a twisted attempt to gain more popularity on the internet. He argued that they'd created a high-pressure situation in which someone could have been injured or killed, as officers responding to active robbery reports are instructed to act decisively towards protecting lives. Allan and Alex, who boasted millions of followers on YouTube and TikTok, each faced multiple felony charges that could have resulted in prison sentences of up to 5 years, before they pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor and thus received a much more lenient sentence. Number 7. Gigi Wu. A woman who gained attention on the internet for taking photos on some of Taiwan's tallest mountain peaks while only wearing a bikini suffered a fatal accident in January of 2019. Over the course of several years, 36-year-old Gigi Wu had amassed a large following on Facebook and Instagram through her photos and hiking endeavors. The idea had come to her after losing a bet with a friend in which her punishment was to upload a photo of herself in a bikini atop a mountain. She ultimately came to be known as the Bikini Hiker. According to the Focus Taiwan news channel, over the span of 4 years, Wu had completed more than 100 hikes and, upon reaching the summit, stripped down to reveal about as many swimming outfits. Her climbs hadn't been without incident, and Wu at one point posted a photo showing extensive scratches and bruises on her legs, sustained during a fall. She embarked on what would become her final adventure on January the 11th of 2019. Wu had planned a 25-day solo hike in Yushan National Park, from Nanhua Mountain to Mount Choshi. On January the 19th, more than a week since she'd set off, Wu called a friend via satellite phone to say that she'd fallen into a ravine. The hiker had plummeted a reported 65 feet into a narrow gorge and was unable to move due to the injuries she'd suffered in the fall. She activated her emergency beacon at close to 5,600 feet above sea level. A rescue operation involving Black Hawk helicopters was put together, but poor weather conditions prevented them from reaching Wu's location. As she was trapped on the mountain, temperatures dropped to around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Roughly 28 hours after she'd activated her beacon, search and rescue teams found Wu, but by that time, she'd succumbed to hypothermia. Number 6. Shia Qiqi. In July of 2021, a Chinese social media influencer suffered a fatal fall of roughly 160 feet while she was reportedly filming a video for her following of over 100,000. Shia Qiqi, aged 23, worked as a crane operator in Chuzhou in western Zhejiang province. The mother of two documented her experience on social media, appealing to users because she didn't fit the stereotypical image of a crane operator. The tragic incident, which the young woman partially captured on video, unfolded with her dancing and speaking to the camera from what appeared to be her crane cabin. The image then changed to show equipment whizzing by as Qiqi could be heard screaming in the clip's audio. The chaotic footage ended with a final shot of the crane structure and the sky from a point of view which, in hindsight, suggested someone was lying on the ground. Witnesses reported that after falling from a height nearly equivalent to that of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Qiqi's body was found with her cell phone in hand. The accident occurred at 5:40 p.m. when most of her co-workers had left the site. As news of Qiqi's death began to circulate online, commenters paid tribute to her and expressed their condolences. There were, however, a number of users who argued that her tragic demise had been a cautionary incident, highlighting the dangers of being distracted by prospective internet fame while working in a dangerous environment. Number 5. Cassandra Thomas. In February of 2020, aspiring stuntwoman Cassandra Thomas faced a fine of $1,000 to $3,000 along with public backlash for a stunt involving a Montreal bus. The 19-year-old self-confessed adrenaline addict, originally from the French island of Saint Martin in the Caribbean, had amassed several 100,000 followers on Instagram through her stunts. Some of them included rooftoping, dirt bike tricks, and various acrobatic jumps. The stunt that would cause controversy in the province of Quebec saw Thomas hang with one hand from the rear bumper of a Montreal STM bus. The driver was unaware that she was there and continued along the regular route down Rue Sherbrooke. Thomas was thus dragged behind it on her back at speed with only a puffy jacket and a thin layer of snow protecting her from the pavement. The clip rapidly amassed tens of thousands of views after she'd posted it on social media, captioning it, "When you miss your bus." The teenager was subsequently dubbed the Montreal Bus Surfer, while a statement released by STM called her behavior deplorable and dangerous. Thomas had not only risked her health, but, as pointed out by several internet commenters, could have inspired others to imitate the stunt and get hurt. She stated in a later interview that she didn't regret her actions, admitting that she'd wanted to gain internet attention from the bus surfing video and then potentially parlay it into stunt work. Number 4. Josephine Ginski. In March of 2017, a Wisconsin teenager asked her father to take photos of her as she was being arrested for armed robbery, so that she could later post them on social media. 18-year-old Josephine Ginski had been regularly talking to an unnamed man on Facebook under the alias Josephine King, before agreeing to meet with him at an intersection in Sheboygan on March the 5th. After arriving at the agreed-upon spot, Ginski invited the man into her car. A short while later, her boyfriend, 27-year-old Curtis Britton, got in the back seat. He pressed the gun to the man's head, and the couple demanded his wallet and cell phone. The victim went to the police, who subsequently identified Ginski through her Facebook profile and then interviewed her at her father's home. She initially denied knowing Britton, whom she'd reportedly been dating for about a year, but when pressed further, admitted to the armed robbery. As Ginski was being taken into custody, she asked her father to take pictures of her in handcuffs with the intention of uploading them on Facebook. Britton was also arrested at his home, where officers found marijuana, drug paraphernalia, and 2 BB guns. Both he and Ginski were charged with felony armed robbery. Number 3. Timothy Wilkes. While filming a prank video he'd hoped would go viral on YouTube, a young man was shot and killed in Tennessee on February the 5th of 2021. Local authorities responded to reports of a shooting in the parking lot of the Urban Air Trampoline Park in Nashville at around 9:25 p.m. Timothy Wilkes, age 20, and a friend, whose identity wasn't released, were shooting a video that involved them approaching a group of people while wielding butcher knives. 23-year-old David Starnes Jr. wasn't in on the fake robbery and thought that he and the group he was with were being attacked. The aspiring YouTubers never got a chance to reveal that it was a prank. Starnes pulled out a handgun and shot Wilkes, who subsequently succumbed to his injuries. No charges were filed in the immediate aftermath, as the former maintained he'd acted in self-defense, believing himself to have been in genuine danger. Number 2. Ava Louise. In March of 2020, in the early stages of coronavirus pandemic, an aspiring internet influencer sparked outrage online through the coronavirus challenge, in which she filmed herself licking an airplane toilet seat. 21-year-old Ava Louise's stunt went viral, and even though it received widespread criticism, there were nevertheless several imitators who started licking toilet seats for fame, risking their health in the process. One 21-year-old from Beverly Hills ended up in the hospital after doing so. In a subsequent video interview with Dr. Phil, Louise confessed that the overall scope of the stunt was clout and claimed she was jealous coronavirus was getting more publicity than her. Louise tried to defend her actions by saying that concerns over the pandemic were greatly exaggerated, while also suggesting she was representing the whole of Gen Z by being unafraid of the virus. When asked by Dr. Phil if the attention was worth potentially infecting someone and killing them, Louise said, "Yeah," before making further claims that the pandemic was blown out of proportions. In the same interview, however, the young woman also revealed that the widely condemned stunt had been partially staged. Louise reported that she'd licked the toilet seat on her sugar daddy's private jet while on her way to Miami for spring break, adding that it had been disinfected beforehand. Number 1. James Potok. In February of 2020, shortly after COVID-19 had been declared a public health emergency of international concern, a Canadian social media influencer carried out a stunt on a flight from Toronto to Jamaica that resulted in the aircraft being turned around. By his own admission, 28-year-old Potok Philippe, whose real name is James Potok, intended to share a video of the so-called prank in hopes of it going viral on Instagram or YouTube. About midway through the flight, he got up and announced that he'd just returned from the Yunnan province, to which he referred as the capital of the coronavirus, adding that he wasn't feeling too well. Roughly 15 minutes later, WestJet flight staff asked him to put on gloves and a mask and told him to move to the back of the airplane. His claims were also shared with the pilot, and a decision was made to turn the airplane back to Toronto. A second flight out was also cancelled in the incident's wake, affecting the travel plans of 243 passengers. Many subsequently condemned Patok's actions as selfish and ignorant. He was assessed by medical experts who found that he was symptom-free, after which he was arrested and charged with mischief. The internet fame seeker has since apologized for the prank and for failing to grasp the seriousness of a global health emergency. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be rich but hated by everyone, or a beloved person without a penny to your name? Let us know in the comments section below.